Hi everybody, welcome back to the Chasing Psychological Safety video series. This week we're going to talk to you about impression management, which is one of the most important and useful facets of psychological safety. So a quick recap for you. Impression management, psychological safety, we always talk about as the umbrella term for the approach. Impression management is what I like to refer to as the nuts and bolts. So when you are feeling afraid of speaking up, you are usually trying to avoid appearing ignorant, intrusive, negative, or incompetent. So when you put it into that context, it suddenly starts to feel very clear, what it actually feels like not to speak up and why you might not speak up. So that's the recap. Now that we're back from the holidays, and welcome back everybody, we're wanting to talk to you about a few ways in which you can start to work on impression management. So we've already told you about humor hackathons. Please make sure you are working on your team relaunches and get in touch if you want to talk about those. We've talked about the Pitch Fest, and now we want to share a couple more ideas with you today.
That's right. So as we were saying in yesterday's article, we'd like to give you some hands-on, as usual, tips as to how you could be increasing this side of things. And it is undoubtedly the biggest of the things that you should be working on consistently. It takes a lot of work. A lot of impression management is evident, and sometimes you can see it in the way people behave outwardly. You can see it in the way they want to present themselves physically, but those are the easy things to catch. The less easy things to catch are happening behind closed doors and in people's heads and hearts, and those are the ones we need to start chipping at. Those behaviors where people have stopped themselves from speaking up because of these fears are the ones that we need to work on. So we'll talk to you today about two major ways in which you can do that. One of them is something we often advise teams they do. It's called a Courage Hackathon. And what we normally try and pack into those, and this doesn't need us in any which way, you can do it on your own. These are just some of the elements that we would advise you pack into them. And those are, we would start such a hackathon with, first of all, an introduction as to why you're doing it, of crystal clarity on what impression management is and why it's not the desired behavior. Have that conversation with your team. Don't just plunge them into some human hackathon if you don't need one. I'm sorry, some courage hackathon if you don't need one. You always need the human hackathon. But also, if you do have our software, spend time in our impression management alerts and dissect those, connect them to your courage score, connect them to your speaking up score, and have the team together realize it would be good to do something about this behavior. And once you do, maybe suggest a Courage Hackathon. And finally, what this Courage Hackathon should contain, once you've all agreed that it's a good idea for the team, is to have maybe at least 3 parts. One part would be that everyone prepares in advance one of their inspirational courage stories, whether that's an idol they have or an animal they like or a behavior they've seen. My favorite one, my go-to one, is the bison story, but multiple other things that people can come up with. Have them think about it, come and share one thing that they find inspirational from the point of view of bravery. Let them know it can be anything from something from history to something from present day, a story that inspires them and makes them feel like they can, in perspective, be courageous. So that's a general first part. The second part would be that they do that you together do an exercise called a permission slip pass, meaning if you look at the people in your meeting, everyone say passes one of these permission slips to the left, so the person next to me would receive one from me and the one next to them one from them, and so on. And the way this would work is, for instance, I would take a minute to think about it and then write down a message that I would send to Fionn. We all would send our message at the same time, and it would be something of the sort, you have permission to speak in every retro, or here's permission that you swear, or here's permission, have this permission that you just tell us when something really bothers you. Whatever you've noticed that the other person might be holding back from, give them a permission slip that they stop doing so sometimes. That lets your teammates know that you're observing them, you see them, you know what's happening in their heads sometimes. It brings up points that we can all talk about. It's really, really useful of an exercise. So lastly, it's really interesting to attempt to do a vulnerability pledge. In light of these things that have been passed around, all of this conversation on permission slips, how can we be more brave at work? It's interesting for each of us to take a minute and think, right, what could we be doing that we promise to be vulnerable about, right? So for instance, in the next few months, I absolutely promise, hand on heart, that I will speak up at least once, or I will point out if I see a mistake, or I promise to tell you something that otherwise would be slightly embarrassing, or I pledge that I will open up about a topic that I would have otherwise thought was personal or dangerous to me. Anything that you think would be an appropriate vulnerability pledge, a moment that you are willing to show up and be vulnerable with your team. Let them know what it is that you're willing to do and try to keep yourself accountable to it. So those three parts obviously include anything else you'd like, just as long as you make this entire meeting about the importance of being really courageous and brave with each other and why it's so safe to do it in this bubble of people that love you, care about you, and want to do good work together.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that could be really, really useful for people, and that we've actually seen people working with and getting huge value out of, aside of the Courage Hackathons, has been something called a catch yourself counter. So talking about impression management and those moments when you might find yourself holding back, it's about starting to build some self-awareness of those moments and catch yourself, literally catch yourself in those moments. So it relates in a way to reflection and journaling, which is, are two really well-known, powerful tools in self-development and team development. So if you are sitting in a meeting and you have an idea or you have a concern, and for some reason you don't voice that concern, catching yourself and reflecting either in the moment or afterwards and thinking, why didn't I do that? What was the reason? Is a really valuable reflective exercise to go through. And the hope and the purpose is that eventually you will get to a stage where not only do you catch yourself in the moment, but you're able to use that to overcome that moment of impression management and speak up, which is what we're looking for as that outcome for a psychologically safe environment. So the catch yourself counter, give it a go.
Right. So in total, these are not all the things you could be doing. We encourage you to spend time and let us know if you've tried other things that would stop you from doing impression management with each other. Because what happens every time that you do, it's a good sign that you don't have psychological safety at the level you should in the team. And it's also a good sign that every time that you've stopped yourself from opening your mouth, that psychological safety lowers even further. And there's just no way that your team is going to be performant and successful in its absence. So kind of the shortest way to being performant is to make sure that anytime that these negative behaviors occur, where you stop yourself from being courageous and open, that they are counted for, that they are discussed, that they are stopped the next time around. So good luck working on impression management. Let us know what else you found. Let us know how you're using the software. And then we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.